Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today we're here with a special guest, and that's Bitcoin developer Jimmy Song. How you going, mate?
I am doing great. How's everything over there down under?
It's pretty good actually. We're coming into summer, and it's been a harsh winter with the crypto markets as
Hmm.
well. So it's actually been exactly a year since Jimmy and I spoke about Segwit 2x and gave our predictions, and then the day after, everyone backed out and it didn't go ahead. So we'll see how our conversation goes today. So Jimmy, what's an average day look like for you now? I know you're still doing a little bit of contributing, but a lot of educating as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I've got a ton of stuff that I'm working on. I do look at the core repo and try to review as much as I can. Oftentimes, the pull requests are over my head or they've already been reviewed, so I don't review those things. I'm also working on my book. We have a release date, hopefully right before South by Southwest. So, I can do some sort of book signing right around then. So I'm busy trying to make that better. I'm also, working on making the class that I've been teaching better. So I do that about once a month. Um, and I'm working on a new course for programming Lightning, which I think will need just as many devs as Bitcoin. So these are all things that I'm working on constantly. There's probably other projects that I'm missing, but yeah, that's what it feels like I'm doing every day.
Cool. And as you say, you are coming to Australia to help educate people, and we'll talk about that again at the end. But what are all these
Mm.
things that people are working on now? We have Blockstream and the Lightning Network, but Bitcoin's still open source. A lot of people forget that anyone can contribute. So, what is the main things that sort of excite you?
Well, I think Liquid is really interesting by Blockstream. They have a federated security model rather than it being decentralized, and I see some real potential there because it's meant to be a side chain where you can do transactions really fast, and you have a lot of similar. It's closer to Bitcoin than say something like Lightning. Also, obviously excited about Lightning. That has a very different security model. You got to keep your key online, especially if you're like a routing node and things like that. Um, and that will that changes things quite a bit as far as how things go. But it's instant, it's provable. There's a lot of interesting like unsolved problems there that people are working on. I'm also interested in drive chains, although that hasn't been going quite as much as say something like Liquid. Yeah, so I mean there's a lot of interesting projects. Segwit version 1 will probably come out in the next year or so, along with and that'll probably have Schnorr signatures and a bunch of other stuff.
Cool. So with Lightning Network, we've actually in Australia been pretty lucky in terms of merchants adoption with a company called Travel by Bit. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but
Mm.
we have had Lightning Network transactions going at Brisbane Airport now where all the shops accept Bitcoin. So are you more going down this
Mm.
path where you think it's a point of sale and we're going to need hardware, or do you think this very much is going to be just nice, friendly apps and a software thing that's going to get better and better for users?
Yeah, that's a good question. It really depends on the market and how people end up using it. And the user experience is something that people can sort of try to impose on the market, but oftentimes the market figures out something else. So it's difficult to tell at this point in time, like how much people adopt it and so on. I mean, like I have Bitcoin, and I don't really want to spend that much of it for something like something that's like 50 cents or something below sort of the Visa threshold or something like that. It might make a lot of sense to utilize. But anything more than that, it's like, is it more convenient? Like, what benefits am I getting? The merchant is really the party that needs to give those incentives, and not sure merchants really wanted that badly yet. And that might take some time. And that might take Bitcoin, going hyperbolic or something like that. At which point merchants might be like, okay, we really want Bitcoin, and it feels like hyperinflation now, so we'll give you a significant discount.
Yeah, I know that one of the things merchants say to us is when you tell them that they're not paying that 2 or 3% Visa Mastercard fee, that's a big attraction for them as
Hmm.
well. Do you think that Lightning is going to become this coffee payments? In terms of the channels and the amount that they can hold in them at any one time, is this going to continue to get more and more channels and more nodes and become very, very decentralized for payments under $100 or $1,000? And then Bitcoin becomes this very secure network for very large payments where I can send $1 million for, still a matter of cents across the network.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the way it's going to go, but it's really hard to tell, right? I do feel like it'll be more useful for like peer-to-peer payments or something like that. If you hang out with some Bitcoin friends, you might want to leave open a channel, and then that person pays for dinner, and you can just like send it over really quickly without having to do anything on chain. It's instant. You don't have to verify stuff like that. There's like a shop that you shop at often. This might end up being a little more convenient than using a credit card or something like that. But again, it all depends on who the counterparty is. If the merchant is giving you like a 5% discount for using Lightning payments, that might make sense. But if you're going to get better value out of using a credit card, then that might be what you choose instead. Consumer behavior is really difficult to predict, but generally the incentives do matter. And right now, I'm not sure I see too many incentives for using it that particular way, like buying coffee at Starbucks or something like that. It might be possible. It's just that not a lot of people might use it because they're like, okay, well, I can use a credit card, get points on my card, get the Starbucks reward points, and all this other stuff. At which point, it's like, maybe I won't use it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Sitting in Australia and the US, where we have a decent system, tap and pay and things like that, it really is throughout Africa and Asia, where they have the billions of unbanked. That probably, there's more of that opportunity, I think.
Well, you would think so, but you go to China and like they use like WeChat for absolutely everything. Like you can't even transact unless you're on WeChat, basically. And even in places like Africa, you go to somewhere like Kenya, you can't do anything unless you have like M-Pesa, right? Like on your phone. That's what people find convenient. If we can get maybe that level of convenience and discount for Bitcoin purchases, I think that's when that happens. That might not happen for a while, honestly, but we need to build out the network now so that we're ready when that time comes.
I agree. Any thoughts on, you just mentioned Snore signatures, but Mimblewimble and other technologies that can lead closer towards privacy going forward? How far away is that? Still 24, 36 months or closer?
Yeah, it's hard to say because Mimblewimble has like 2 implementations, and they're I think both planning to launch as an altcoin. The thing that's difficult to realize about, or that not a lot of people realize about Mimblewimble, is that it doesn't work. It's like very different than Bitcoin or Monero or Zcash or whatever. It's just very there are cut-throughs. You don't have addresses. You need interactivity whenever you're paying someone or being paid. So you don't, with Bitcoin or Monero or whatever, you just post an address somewhere and then anyone can pay you. With Mimblewimble, you need to interact first before you can get paid. So you go, okay, well, here's the hiding here's the mask that you need in order to make sure that the payment is hidden from everybody else, so they don't know how much it is, and so on. And then they can send you money. Like it's tricky in that way, and it's very different. Kind of like Lightning, it has different features and properties, so you have to be aware of those things before you go, play with it. So I don't know how the market will take that. Honestly, like, it's not obvious until you try it and you go, okay, well, that was kind of annoying, or that was very easy, or and there's still proof of work in there, so you might have to wait and all that stuff. The thing about privacy coins, especially when you're hiding amounts, which is a big thing, right? Like that gives you a lot of privacy. Is that I think it runs up against the store of value proposition. When you have to trust the math, you don't know if anyone's like broken that math, and that is that's something that you have to trust going forward kind of forever. But if I broke some ECDSA operation, privacy coins are probably where I would go first, because I could probably exploit it and not have anyone know, or not have it be obvious for a pretty long time. Whereas in Bitcoin, it would be obvious almost right away because it's all open. So, these are the concerns that I would have with respect to the privacy coins.
That's a great point as well. Rootstock, are you expecting this to be something that competes with Ethereum, smart contracts off-chain, or is this going to have completely different applications? I know you haven't been the biggest fan of Ethereum, but how do you view Rootstock?
Well, I think they're too late. I mean, Ethereum has that network. You can go and launch an ERC20 token on Ethereum Classic right now if you wanted to. Like, it's more or less the same code base. So you can do that, but people don't. Why? Because, if you launch an ERC20 token on Ethereum Classic, you're not going to get as many buyers, although like very few people are buying these days. But it's going to be even less. So people tend to think that it's the technology that matters when it comes to stuff like this. I tend to disagree. I think it's much more about who has the lead, and like the network effect, and what people expect, and the risk profiles for doing stuff like that. I mean, that said, it's possible that if Ethereum continues to do stuff like the DAO, where they roll things back and it's very centrally controlled, then maybe people start trusting some other place, and then in that way maybe Rootstock can win out. I don't know, but that's something to consider.
Cool. Moving on. Last time we spoke, one of the things you said was as ICOs start to taper off, we're going to see a lot more hard forks, and hard fork will be the new way to create a false sort of sense of value, I guess. And now we have Bitcoin Gold, private, and the list goes on. And some of these things were floating in the top 10 for months on end. So are you thinking that that's going to be another theme we see in the next sort of bull run, more and more of these hard forks?
Well, so the thing about hard forks is that a lot of them have lost like more than 90% of their value. So back in January, I was helping some people with their hard forks. I mean, it was like 1% of Bitcoin, like a single hard fork, which is, can be a significant amount of money. If you have like $100,000 in Bitcoin, then you got like $1,000. That's pretty good. And, that was for a single fork. There were multiple ones. What's happened since is the bear market has crushed those more than anything else, because a lot of people have seen it as free money, and they've more or less like gotten a ton of I've certainly redeemed all the hard forks that I could. So have a lot of other people, and that's put a lot of selling pressure. So it seems like more of a flash in the pan as far as like manufacturing hard forks. The hard forks that seem more interesting are sort of like principled, like real difference of opinion hard forks. So Bitcoin Cash is scheduled to have one next week. I think exactly a week from now. That's going to be a big one, because I think that's two groups that really disagree on how things are supposed to be. Shouldn't really be surprised, because these are the people that split off. Turns out, like when you're a revolutionary, or when you're the one that wants to overthrow somebody, those people don't tend to be like governance in that capacity very well. So they're splitting into two or more. We have no idea how that's going to play out, but I'll be watching that closely. But that sort of thing seems like more the thing that will happen, especially to altcoins that have some popularity. I could see, like if something happens on Ethereum, I mean, Casper is obviously something that's on the horizon. If people don't agree with Casper, I can totally see a hard fork happening there. So things like that, I think, could happen more. But yeah, the altcoin ICO thing seems like it's definitely on the downswing. Although, I mean, people still buy them, but I mean, people are getting more educated. They're like, okay, I can't just buy any piece of crap and expect to make money. I have to be a little more discriminating. Eventually, they'll come around and say, you know what? Bitcoin is the one that's actually useful. Pretty much everything else seems kind of scammy.
Yeah, by the time this goes up, Jimmy, I think the Bitcoin hard fork will only be probably 48 hours away. And I know that, a lot of people aren't big Bitcoin Cash fans, but from a game theory point of view, it is actually going to be really interesting to watch out what happens when two opposing sides can't agree. And I'm waiting to see if someone plays bluff and pulls out at the last minute.
Well, I mean, not only that, but the hashing power on both on Bitcoin Cash is so low right now. It's I think right around like 8 or 9% the hashing power of Bitcoin. So I mean, somebody like Jihan Wu, who many suspect has somewhere north of like 15-16%, can definitely utilize that to attack the other chain if necessary. And, I mean, assuming something like a 70-30 split or something like that, you can definitely attack the other chain. And that, I mean, there are all sorts of weird scenarios because there's 3 parties involved. That's the 3-body problem. So, you can have some weird scenarios, especially as because people like Jihan and a lot of Chinese miners have a lot of hashing power, a lot of which is on Bitcoin. So it's like, if they may choose to move it to the Bitcoin Cash side or whichever fork that they're on, just to defend themselves. Like there's defensive, hashing, and there's offensive hashing, and I mean all sorts of interesting scenarios that are going to happen here.
Yeah, I wasn't sure we were going to talk about Bitcoin Cash today, and we've ended up talking about it for 5 minutes already. Finally, Jimmy, what do you see as the biggest headwinds for Bitcoin going forward? Because I know a lot of people really say, oh, Bitcoin's this slow, old technology and altcoins are surpassing it, but it's not going for move fast and break things. Once there's tried and tested technology, Bitcoin can implement those and so on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of people sort of mistakenly believe that like this is a technology play, and a lot of VCs honestly make the same mistake. They think, okay, whatever can iterate fastest, what can bring like value to the market and listen to their customers and change things and all this other stuff. That's not what this is. This is money, and for money, stability and immutability, or the lack of change, is actually a feature, and people just don't have the right view of what this is, and it'll become very clear. You can have all the features in the world, doesn't mean that people will value it as a store of value or will want it to keep. And that's I mean, if you're thinking more like collectibles, I think that's where the better analogy is. If you're thinking like, if you had a Picasso painting and you were constantly changing it up, would that be worth something? Not really. Like, you might, like, you're actually devaluing it every time you change it. I mean, you can put a nicer frame around it, something like that. Those don't actually change the painting itself, but that's how we have to think about this stuff. It's not a tech play. It's much more a monetary play, and for that you need immutability.
Well, these are all very exciting developments, Jimmy. We do need a lot of developers, so I'll put all the links in the description below, guys. But any messages for people that want to get involved more or learn, Jimmy?
Yeah, so I have this class and I'm bringing it to Australia. That'll be continent number 5 this year, so that's very exciting for me. I was there like I think oh gosh, it's been like 13 years or something like that. I was there 13 years ago. Really enjoyed the place. But if you are somebody that's a developer and you want to get into this space, it can be very intimidating. And I know because I went through the same thing. Like, where do I even start? How do I even learn about this stuff? Then you start reading specifications and they have all of these terms that you're not familiar with or don't make any sense. This is where I'm trying to sort of help you shortcut all of that. I've had so many students that were like, okay, well, you know, I tried to learn this stuff for a year. I took your class for 2 days. Now I learned more in 2 days than I have tried on my own for like a year. So that's the value that I'm trying to bring. And I know there's a lot of developers in Australia, companies in Australia that are into Bitcoin. And I'm trying to help, make that happen all over the world. That's why I visited 5 continents. I will visit Africa at some point. I don't know when that's going to be, but you know that's the hope is to get so many developers on this thing that that the ecosystem can grow, that the entire all the companies, all the open source projects, they can have more contributors, more eyes looking at things. And Bitcoin's a lot like a city. The more people there are, the better it is for everyone else. So, yeah, awesome. That's the hope.
Well, guys, if you want to learn more, if you want to have a steak with me and Jimmy in Sydney or Melbourne, check out all the details below. But thanks so much for joining us today, Jimmy.
All right. Thank you.